What's up, y'all? It's me, Jaren Lim, your Indonesian mental health advocate. I apologize that I haven't uploaded videos recently. I had problems with video editing and I needed to find a video editor. I finally found one and I will try my best to upload video routinely starting from this week. Buat gengs yang orang Indo, jangan lupa kalau video-video gue itu ada subtitle dalam dua bahasa Inggris sama bahasa Indonesia. Jangan lupa dinyalain ya kalau kalian butuh subtitlenya. Why do I feel anxious or stressed all the time? That's one of the most common existential questions I've heard. Say a boy is spanked every time he cries for milk as an infant, messes his pants as a 2-year-old, and explores his genitals as a toddler. He may eventually come to believe that his various impulses are very dangerous, and he may eventually feel overwhelming anxiety whenever he has such impulses. This sets the stages for generalized anxiety disorder. Is that the whole story though? In the last video, we talked about how most mental disorders are due to epigenetics, which is an interaction between genetics and the environment, or GXE. If you haven't watched my previous videos, go and watch it first to better understand this video. Think about human body type. Some people are endomorphic, some people are mesomorphic, and some people are ectomorphic. An ectomorph tends to be thin and they struggle to gain weight. They can eat piles of food and they stay looking the same. On the other hand, an endomorph tends to gain weight and keep it on. They may feel like they gained 5 pounds just by passing by a donut shop. The mesomorph, on the other hand, has a middle-of-the-road build that takes on the best of the two worlds. We know that endomorphic, mesomorphic, ectomorphic are due to genetic. However, does that mean, for example, an ectomorphic cannot have a bulky body or an endomorph can have a skinny body? Nope. That's not true. Apparently, your body's phenotype is also due to epigenetic. One of the pathways that was found to play a very important role in muscle growth is the mTOR-AKT pathway. The mTOR protein is a mammalian target of rapamycin protein synthesized by mTOR gene. In short, different people's gene may synthesize different level of mTOR, which makes it easier for some people to gain muscle, but harder for some other people. But HIT, or high intensity training, has a stimulatory effect on mTOR pathway. So despite harder, an ectomorph can eventually gain muscle and have a muscular body if they exercise and eat well. Their gene does not change, but their gene expression can be altered by the environment, such as nutrition and proper training. This is what we call as epigenetic. In other words, epigenetic is a stable alteration in gene expression without changes to the underlying DNA sequences. Studies have shown that not only genetics, but epigenetics can also be transmitted to the next generation. Transmission is stable and persists through at least 3 generations, known as transgenerational inheritance. The next question is, how is this related to stress and anxiety? One of the most popular research methods in psychobiology to study stress and anxiety is cross-fostering. The model we usually use in the lab is rat, as it is unethical for us to experiment on humans. Psychobiologists try to tease apart the genetic and experiential contributions, and the studies have been replicated a lot. I am going to show you one of the studies. In this study, during the first generation, or F0, they examined the mothers or the dams' behavior. Some dams displayed high licking, grooming, and archback nursing behavior, or LGABN, operationally defined as spending more than 15% of their time licking, grooming, and archback nursing their pups. And by the way, LGABN means licking, grooming, and archback nursing. Some dams, on the other hand, are low LGABN, which is operationally defined as spending less than 10% of their time licking, grooming, and archback nursing their pup. In the study, they want to study whether anxiety and stress behavior is caused by genetic or environment. That is, mothers or dams licking and grooming and archback nursing behavior. The experimenter divided the rats into 8 groups. The first 2 groups are high and low licking grooming and arch-back nursing dams, and the controlled group. The controlled group means their pups were untouched. They didn't do an experiment on their pups. The third group and the fourth group are high and low licking grooming and arch-back nursing dams paired with W. W in this study means that they were taken away from their mother and then they were fostered back to their own mother, their own biological mothers. And then the fifth and the sixth group are HH and LL. HH are the pups from the high licking, grooming, and arch-back nursing dams were cross-fostered to another mother that is also high licking, grooming, and arch-back nursing. LL, on the other hand, are pups from low licking, grooming, and arch-back nursing dams that were cross-fostered with another dam that is also low licking, grooming, and arch-back nursing. The last 2 groups are the experiment groups, which are the HL and LH, meaning the pup from high LGABN dams were cross-fostered to low LGABN dam and vice versa. And afterwards, they examined the offspring's behavior as an adult, which is F1, and then again, they observed the offspring's behavior, or the second generation or F2 behavior as an adult. And this is what they found. All the pups, including first and the second generation, F1 and F2, that were raised by high licking, grooming, and arch-back nursing dams, including the pups of low LGABN dams that were cross-fostered to high LGABN dams, were much less anxious and fearful compared to pups raised by low LGABN dams, including the pups of high LGABN dams that were cross-fostered to low LGABN dams. They displayed more exploratory behavior in open spaces and less fearful behavior, while pups that were less licked, groomed, and arch-back nursed displayed more anxious behavior. That is, they were less exploratory and they tend to stay and hide in a closed space. And they did not stop there. They further observed their behaviors towards their offspring. Apparently, the pups that were raised by high LGABN dams also exhibited high LGABN behavior towards their pups. And the pups that were raised by low LGABN dam also displayed low LGABN behavior towards their pups. From this study, the conclusion was that behavioral differences in this case were not due to genetic but through experiences. However, the question is, how could they transmit the experiences manifested in their behaviors throughout 3 generations at least? How does early experience and maternal care cause this non-genomic transmission so experiences can be inherited? In this case, the experimenters use the technique we call as FISH, FISH, which is fluorescence in situ hybridization, to study the rat's brain. They found that there were significant differences in the glucocorticoid receptors and corticotropin releasing hormone, or CRH receptor density between the brain of high and low LGABN dams. What do GR, or glucocorticoid receptor, and CRH have anything to do with stress and anxiety? This pathway is also known to be one of the stress pathways, including in human. It is called as HPA axis, that is, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis. When you experience stressful stimuli, it induces the hypothalamus to produce CRH, and CRH induces your anterior pituitary to secrete the ACTH, or adrenocorticotropic hormone, and the ACTH travels to the adrenal gland above your kidney via blood, and it stimulates the adrenal gland to produce cortisol hormone, which is known to be one of the stress hormones. Let's talk about cortisol. Cortisol is a member of glucocorticoid hormone that binds to the GR in the hippocampus of your brain. This hormone causes, for example, an increase in your blood pressure, blood sugar, heart rate, attention and memory, and it also decreases sensitivity to pain. This hormone is what keeps us alive throughout evolution. When our ancestors saw a saber-toothed tiger, for instance, they needed to be able to mobilize their energy throughout their body as rapidly as possible. So increases in blood pressure and heart rate increases the speed of blood circulation throughout your body. Increase in gluconeogenesis or generation of glucose in your body from liver or certain non-carbohydrate carbon substrates increases energy production in your body, so you can run faster from the saber-toothed tiger. It blunted your sensitivity to pain, so in case you have a bad day and you unfortunately got bitten by saber-toothed tiger, you wouldn't feel the pain as much. Acute stress is what keeps us alive right now through our evolution, and that's why we have this stress pathway in our body. However, chronic stress or extreme prolonged stress is detrimental to our body. For example, while acute stress or moderately prolonged stress improves your immune function, chronic stress and continuous release of your cortisol hormone decreases your immune function significantly. And this process is also known as allostasis. That is the process by which the body responds to stressors in order to regain your homeostasis. We'll talk about this more in the future videos. In conclusion, stress by itself is not bad per se. What makes stress bad is the magnitude and the duration. Chronic extreme stress, for example, is detrimental to our body. After prolonged and extreme stress, your body begins to set the metabolic responses such as blood pressure, heart rate, and so on and so forth as a baseline. Mentally speaking, their baseline behavior, for example, is on anxious and fearful mode most of the time. Going back to the study, what they found was that in comparison to the offspring of low licking grooming archback nursing dams, the adult offspring of high LGAVN dams showed increased hippocampal glucocorticoid receptor mRNA and decreased corticotropin releasing factor or CRF in the PVNH or paraventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus, which synthesizes the CRH. They found out that licking, grooming, and archback nursing behavior removes methyl group from the promoter region of the NR3C1 gene, that is the gene responsible for encoding the GR. As the methyl groups were removed from the promoter region has more vacant space for NGFIA or the transcription factor to bind to the NR3C1 gene promoter, so the gene will encode more and more GR. Apparently, high GR expression and low corticosterone or cortisol level are associated with low anxiety behavior. And again, these gene expressions are transgenerationally inherited throughout at least 3 generations. This again strengthens the fact that gene and environment are interacting with each other. They are not dissociable. Your stress and anxiety are real and biological. It is not just in your head. You're not tripping. It is not because you're not grateful enough. Again, as stated in the previous video, mental disorders generally deviate from the CDCB hypothesis. Instead, it fits the polygenic mode of inheritance. In one study, they screened 7 million base pair regions of chromosome number 18. They found that epigenetic changes linked to licking, grooming, and archback nursing behavior are not isolated to one gene. They found many promoters as well as transcriptional and intragenic sequences associated with this. One of the other pathways associated with stress, anxiety, and even depression that I will talk in depth in the future is the SERT or serotonin transporter pathway. Hang tight. There are plenty of studies that have shown the correlation between the animal and the human model. For example, we have learned that a vicious cycle in which abused children grew up in. We also learned that substance use disorders are related with childhood trauma, for example, based on this animal model. We even saw the association between long-term health problems that can result from lower socioeconomic environment. From this video, I really hope that we don't stigmatize people that are chronically stressed or anxious. I really hope that you don't punish yourself for being anxious or stressed. If you feel like you are always stressed and anxious that impair your performance in your daily life, causes high distress, seek professional help right away. Mental disorders do not differ from physical disorders. They need to be treated. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you like this video, and follow my Instagram here. And see you next time.